Welcome back to the Indie Cabra Archives. We often talk about haunted houses as if the buildings themselves are evil. We think of cursed soil or spirits trapped in the walls, but bricks and mortar don't have a conscience. A house is only as sick as the people living inside it. Today's tape takes us to the arid, brutal badlands of central India, a region known as Bundelkhand. It is a place of extreme heat, deep ravines, and isolated villages that time simply forgot. The man in this tape, Dev, was sent there in the late 1990s, before cell phones or GPS. He was an estate appraiser sent to evaluate a massive, crumbling ancestral home that had been abandoned by everyone except the caretaker. What he found wasn't a ghost. It was something infinitely more tragic and far more terrifying. This is a story about the exact point where unbreakable loyalty rots into pure, unadulterated madness. Let's play the tape. I've always been a fan of classic horror. Black and white films, Jimmy Stewart looking out a window into the dark, Cary Grant running through an empty field. You watch enough of those, and you think you know how suspense is supposed to feel. You expect a dramatic musical score to warn you. You expect shadows to stretch across the walls. But in reality, true horror is completely silent. It doesn't look like a movie monster. It looks like dust and rot and sad and broken people. It was December of 1996. The bank I worked for had acquired an old, massive estate in central India because the property taxes hadn't been paid in over a decade. They sent me down there to appraise the land. The locals just called it the Ramgarh house. I drove down in a terrible, rattling rental car. The landscape there was brutal. Dry, dusty ravines, scrub brush, and an endless grey sky. When I finally pulled up to the rusted iron gates of the estate, the place looked like the rotten carcass of a massive brick animal. The roof was sagging. The courtyard was choked with dead weeds. I parked the car, grabbed my duffel bag, and walked up to the heavy wooden front doors. I didn't even have to knock. The door creaked open, and a man was standing there. His name was Hari. He was the caretaker. He must have been close to 80 years old. He was frail. His skin looked like old, dry leather, and he was hunched over as if he was physically carrying the weight of the massive, decaying house on his shoulders. Pinned to his belt was a heavy ring of iron keys that clinked every time he breathed. I introduced myself. I told him that the bank had sent me and the property was going to be sold. Hari didn't look angry. He looked terrified. His hand started to shake. "You cannot sell the house, sir," he whispered, looking around as if someone was listening. "The master is still here, and he does not like strangers." I sighed. The master he was talking about was Vikram Singh, the old feudal landlord who used to own the property. According to my bank files, Vikram Singh had vanished, presumably dying in a city hospital nearly a decade ago. I figured Hari was just confused, senile old man who had lived in isolation for too long. I told him I just needed a room for 2 nights so I could take measurements. He reluctantly let me in. As he walked me to a small guest room on the ground floor, I noticed him constantly glancing up the grand wooden staircase toward the second floor, specifically toward a large, heavy oak door at the very end of the hallway. The door had 3 massive brass padlocks on it. I asked him what was up there. He stopped, his eyes wide. "That is the master's room. He is resting. He has been very sick. You must not make any noise, sir." The first night was freezing. Central India drops to near zero temperatures in December. There was no electricity, just the weak light of a kerosene lantern Hari had left me. Around 2 a.m., I woke up because I was shivering The house was incredibly quiet and cold. No crickets, no wind, just a suffocating silence. But then I heard footsteps. They were slow, dragging, moving across the wooden floorboards on the ceiling directly above me. I got out of bed, put on my boots, and quietly opened my bedroom door. I looked up the grand staircase. Hari was walking up the stairs. In one hand, he held a lantern. In the other, he was carrying a silver tray with a plate of fresh, steaming food and a glass of water. I watched from the shadows as he reached the top of the stairs and shuffled down the long, dark corridor toward the heavily padlocked oak door. He stopped in front of it. He didn't unlock it right away. He leaned his face against the dark wood and spoke in a soft, soothing whisper. "Master, I brought your dinner. I'm sorry it is late. There is a stranger in the house, but do not worry. I will make him leave." I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. He was waiting for a response. And then he smiled. A genuine, warm smile, as if someone had just thanked him through the thick wood. He pulled the heavy iron keys from his belt, unlocked the 3 padlocks, and pushed the door open. The moment the door cracked, a smell rolled out into the hallway. It was so potent, so vile, that even from the bottom of the stairs, my stomach heaved. It smelled like a dumpster left in the sun, sour, sweet, and suffocating. Hari stepped inside, closed the door behind him, and I heard the lock click shut from the inside. The next morning, the smell was gone. I found Hari sweeping the courtyard. I confronted him immediately. I told him I saw him go into the locked room. I told him I knew the old master had been dead for 10 years. I demanded to know who he was hiding up there. His broom stopped. His face went completely blank. He didn't look like a frail old man anymore. He looked entirely disconnected from reality. "The master is not dead," he said. His voice was hollow. "The doctor said he was dead. But that night, after they brought him back to the house, he called out to me. He said he was hungry. I have taken care of him every day since." I realized that I wasn't dealing with a stubborn employee. I was dealing with profound, clinical madness. "Give me the keys, Hari," I said. "I am opening that room." He backed away, clutching the keys to his chest like a child holding a toy. He started crying. "No, sir, please. He hates the light. If you wake him, he will curse the house. He has been sleeping so peacefully." But I didn't care. I grabbed his arm, pried the heavy iron key ring out of his frail hands, and walked inside. He followed right behind me, sobbing and pleading, but he didn't try to physically stop me. I marched up the wooden stairs. My heart was pounding against my ribs. The closer I got to the door, the worse that terrible, sour smell became. I fumbled with the keys, one padlock, then the next, and then the third. I pushed the heavy oak door open. The room was pitch black. The heavy velvet curtains were drawn tight across the windows. The air was thick with dust and that vile stench. I pulled my shirt up over my nose and walked toward the window. I grabbed the heavy curtain and yanked it open. A beam of grey, winter sunlight cut through the dark, illuminating the massive canopy bed in the center of the room. There was someone in the bed, tucked neatly under a heavy, clean quilt. It was a skeleton, the remains of Vikram Singh. He was nothing but dry, brown bone and patches of mummified skin stretched tight over a skull. But he wasn't neglected. The skeleton was dressed in clean, pressed pajamas. The pillow beneath its skull was bright white. The horrible smell in the room wasn't coming from the body. It was coming from the corners of the room. Stacked against the walls were hundreds of silver plates covered in rotting, moldy food, mountains of decay, 10 years' worth of dinners that Hari had brought to a corpse, believing that it was eating. I stumbled backward, hitting the wall. I couldn't breathe. I looked toward the doorway. Hari was standing there. He wasn't crying anymore. He looked completely calm. He walked past me, ignoring me entirely, and sat on the edge of the bed next to the skeleton. He reached out his trembling, wrinkled hand and gently stroked the dry, bone-exposed skull. "Do you see, sir?" Hari whispered to me, not taking his eyes off the corpse. "Your shouting has woken him up, and he is very upset." I was standing in a madhouse. "Hari," I gasped. "He is dead. He's been dead for a decade. We need to leave, and I'm calling the police." Hari smiled, a dry, hollow smile. "A man only dies when there is no one left to serve him," he said softly. "He talks to me every night. He tells me stories. I will never let anyone take him away." I turned to run, but as I moved toward the door, Hari grabbed the kerosene lantern he had left on the bedside table. He didn't throw it at me. He didn't try to attack me. He just looked at me with absolute, peaceful certainty, and he smashed the glass lantern against the wooden floorboards. The kerosene splashed across the dry, rotting wood and the piles of decayed food. The fire caught instantly. It didn't just burn, it exploded upward, catching the heavy velvet curtains and crawling up the wallpaper. The heat hit my face like a physical punch. "Hurry, come on," I screamed, choking on the sudden, thick black smoke. But he didn't move. He lay down on the bed, right next to the skeleton of his master. He pulled the heavy quilt up over both of them. "Go to sleep, master." I heard him sing over the roar of the flames. "I am here." The fire crested the ceiling. The doorway was starting to catch. I had no choice. I covered my face with my jacket and ran. I stumbled down the stairs, bursting through the front doors of the estate, collapsing onto the dead grass of the courtyard. I lay there, cuffing a black suit, watching as the entire second floor of the ramshackle mansion was swallowed by an inferno. The roof collapsed inward 20 minutes later. I left the banking industry shortly after that. People ask me if the house was haunted. I tell them no. Ghosts are simple. Ghosts make sense. What's truly terrifying is the human mind and what it is willing to do to avoid being alone. When the local authorities finally sifted through the ashes of the Ramgarh estate, they found exactly what they have said they would. 2 sets of remains burned into the charred springs of a heavy iron bed frame. One set of bones was very old, the other was fresh. They were completely intertwined, bonded together by the heat of the fire, making it impossible to separate the master from the servant. True horror isn't found in the supernatural. It is found in devotion. A loyalty so absolute, so suffocating, that it demands you burn alive just to keep a corpse company. Thanks to the archivist who submitted this tape. Subscribe to Indicabra for more raw, unedited accounts of psychological terror. Until the next tape, make sure you know exactly who you are talking to in the dark.